Okay, here we go. Just have to pack up. I was reading before I start. I'm almost finished. The Foundation by Isaac Asimov. I had just started that. And it's a good read. I didn't realize when I bought it, though, that it's part of a series. Okay. So my recap from last week, so I just have to grab a few books. And I thankfully have them fairly close by. And I'm just going to move this back a little bit. And I should probably get a pen. Yes, I have my soft sweater on because it's definitely a cold, blustery day here in Ontario. And it's trying to snow, but there isn't any at the moment. Okay, recap from last week. And yes, I have handy dandy notes for this now as well. We touched briefly on Worker in the Light by George Newry and William J. Burns. Hey, John Paul, JP, excellent to see you. We mentioned this particular book because William J. Burns had been a host on a UFO TV program. Unfortunately, one of the episodes that had aired had been a hoax, and the people who caused that hoax who did the hoax came forward and admitted it. That, of course, brought all the other episodes into question, as well as the credibility of William J. Burns. That topic came up because we had been talking about some of the various things going on within the paranormal world. We also touched on How to Hunt Ghosts by Joshua P. Warren. JP, I'm just going through the recap of last week, so this stuff you'll remember. It explained why paranormal investigating is best done at night, and it has to do with the solar winds, the different magnetic fields of the earth. So there actually is an explanation and reason for investigating at night. Another point that came up is whether paranormal investigators should be charging a fee. This is the only author that I've come across who says yes as well. Now, he's talking about and makes a comparison to astronomers. Hello, Mr. Gray. How are you? I loved your video, by the way. I watched it this morning. It was hilarious. So Joshua Warren is saying it's okay to charge a fee for paranormal investigating. I personally disagree because the comparison he makes is to biologists and chemists and astronomers. And quite frankly, I think his comparison is wrong because in order to call yourself a paranormal investigator, there are no college or university courses. There's no criteria. Hello, Mighty Possum. Welcome. So you can't compare a paranormal investigator to an astronomer or a chemist or a biologist, or even like myself, someone with a psychology degree. I mean, we all had to go to college and university. And in order to use those titles, you need to belong to an organization. That simply doesn't exist within the paranormal world. And considering some of the things, not just currently going on, but overall with the paranormal, personally, would I pay a paranormal investigator? No. Do I understand that there are expenses like travel and their time? And for the majority, it's their own time and volunteer work? Absolutely. But you still can't compare yourself to some of these other people who have gone on to get degrees and doctorates and who earn money in those specific fields. But that's just my opinion. So we had talked about him, and I'll be talking a bit more about him a little later on when I come up to Slenderman. We also last week talked about Paranormality by Professor Weissman and The Afterlife Frequency by Mark Anthony. Now, Mark Anthony is a lawyer. He also happens to be a medium. So, quite an interesting combination there. They both, I did mention it. You're right, Mr. Gray. And actually, I mentioned Paranormality, I think it was sometime last year, but I noticed one of your commenters also mentioned it quite recently. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 videos ago. The fascinating thing with these 2 books is Paranormality claims to be proof that the paranormal isn't real, and The Afterlife Frequency claims to prove that it is real. So these 2 books make an excellent point about you need to make up your own mind regarding whether you believe it or not, because they both have, and I've read both, they both make some very interesting points in their books, but neither one, to me anyway, and that's part of my personal experiences. I mean, they both base Paranormality is based on scientific research, and he actually has one of the examples is someone who does cold readings and did it on a number of people, and then that section ends with the individual going through and explaining how they came up with everything so accurately, but the individual isn't a psychic. Mark Anthony, on the other hand, and like I say, he's a lawyer and a medium, goes through a lot of his personal experiences and different examples and presents how he comes up with information and sees spirits and interprets what comes from spirit. And like he says, a lot of it's symbolic. So, I mean, you have both sides of the coin, and I recommend reading both types of books. Although I'm a believer in the paranormal, I've had some experiences. It doesn't mean that I'm closed-minded to what other people have to say. And I highly recommend reading Paranormality because there are a lot of excellent points to consider. I think he does define spirit, JP. And what I will do is I'll be doing a deep dive into both of these books. I just need to sit down and go through the summaries. So that will be kind of like my Nuri deep dive, a little bit of a longer video. And I absolutely appreciate that people are watching and enjoying the content. I just want to read Black Dragon. Love the name. I love that you choose a variety of books and explain the others' backgrounds so we have context. Oh, thank you so much. Well, I feel it's important to do that. One, because, well, this isn't quite like Zoom where, we can back and forth and people can jump in and comment. And I like to provide information so that people can decide on their own whether it's something they want to read or check into. And I always recommend checking out your public library first. There are 3 dragons in the chat, and I love that. Dragons always welcome. I suggest checking out the library first because, and that's actually how I found the afterlife frequency. I checked it out at my library, I began reading it, and I recognized that it would be something that I would enjoy and refer back to again. So then I ended up purchasing it. Paranormality, I came across at a thrift store. So I figured here in Ontario, books are $5 at our Goodwill stores, which I love going to because I find great finds like this and others. And I have to say, it's a book I enjoyed. So there's lots of different places to find it. Excellent idea. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's, to be honest, why I kind of started today with a recap and put in, I made some notes the other day of the books that I want to cover today. So then viewers also know what kinds of things we're talking about. And yeah, figuring out that poll. I don't have too many people checking out. Sorry, I'm just trying to straighten up my books here. I don't have too many people checking out the community tab yet, but that definitely is, I can start doing that. And that in turn may get people looking at the community tab. I find it hard though that Kindle, or yeah, Kindle, or I think I got mine through Amazon, and it wasn't too bad a price actually. Does it $17.95 US. I'm not sure what that would come up to in the UK. And I know here in Canada, if I went to the bookstore, it would be up a few dollars, which I don't understand why. And I love that it's by New World Library. So if you've ever come across anything by Shakti Gawain, or yeah, she's the one who comes to mind. And I'll get into some of the other authors because it's a publishing company I definitely enjoy, for sure. Than a video or stream. Yeah, and to be honest, it's hard because around 14. Okay, great. So that's not too bad a price then. Thanks for that, Black Dragon. Yeah, community tabs, I really wish YouTube would make it easier to find them, because when you go to that homepage, you get your viewer recommendations. Down the side, you have all of the channels that you're sub to, but you have to scroll way down before they show you the community posts from other channels, which is a little bit frustrating because I keep missing different community posts. And then I'm like, oh, I wish I'd read that the other day. Like, to be honest, and I know a lot of people are into shorts, and that's fine. But personally, I wish there was some way to set up my YouTube homepage, or like for any of us, that, you could pick and choose, because I do like some of the For You recommendations, because it does get lost in the videos. Yeah, I'm the same, Black Dragon. I'll be like, oh, shucks, I missed that. But yeah, I wish there was some way to find those posts easier, because there's a lot of great information. And if you're following different channels, it's a good way to keep up. Or sometimes if someone I know who's posting regularly has missed a day, and because I'm not, and Sorry, Dan, I don't do TikTok either. And so your rants always crack me up because I 100% agree. I don't have time. I don't have patience for TikTok. I used to enjoy watching the top 5 channels, but now they're all TikTok. And I just, no, if I wanted to see what was on TikTok, I'd have a TikTok account. I don't have Facebook or Instagram. So community tabs are a good way to catch up with some of the channels that I follow. But again, it's having to scroll way down there. Yeah, I agree, JP. It would be awesome if in the notifications you were saying about, yeah, I got rid of Facebook, I think maybe 2.5 years ago. I mean, it was kind of nice, at least during COVID, and I'd kept in touch with a few people that way. But since then, I'll be honest, I'm so happy I'm not on it anymore. I mean, there are channels I miss and some content. There were some great little pictures with jokes and things like that that I used to follow, but all the other nonsense. I also, miss Messenger, but people could get in touch with me either by sending me an email. I don't know if I'm going to try Discord again. I still have to, because it works on my iPad, but I can't log out for fear of I'll have a bugaboo trying to get back in. And I can't log into it on my laptop because it seems to have a big issue with the VPN. And I don't know if that's the problem, if other people have issues, which is a shame because there's some great posts and communities there as well. But I guess I'm just not meant to be part of it. So, that was the other. So the other summary, and I just need to grab them here. If you hear that thump, it's the other books. The other books that we had touched on last week, because I was mentioning that in December, it's a difficult and challenging time for a number of people, myself included, because there's family and friends we wish that were still here. So much of the holidays seem to have become commercial, and people have forgotten kind of what that particular day is about. So it can be a challenge, and we've got, at least here in Ontario, and I'm sure in other places, it's colder weather, you've got clouds, and just there's a whole lot of stuff emotionally going on. So in December, I'm going to start looking at some lighter subjects. And one of the books is 3-Minute Positivity. It's a workbook. And it just has, actually, I shared this with a friend of mine who's, yeah, I shared this with a friend of mine who unfortunately doesn't focus on self care and is always saying she doesn't have time and this and that. And I'm like, you have 3 minutes. And there are a ton of different exercises and activities that you can do to stay focused, stay in a place of gratitude. So I'm going to start working on that, and I'll be talking more about that in an upcoming video. We also talked about 369 Laws of Attraction. This is also a workbook, and it's based on Nikola Tesla's work. His name keeps coming up all over the place with my readings. You're right, Black Dragon, and I deal with anxiety as well as depression. So I am always looking. I've got, sayings on boxes. I've done up a positivity board that I'll be sharing with a lot of different ideas. And I find that it's really important, one, to be mindful of when is it, the weather, when am I kind of in that gloomy headspace, and how can I get myself out of that? So I enjoy finding books like this with easy to do exercises that definitely help, because yes, I have the deep breathing and all of that, but it also helps to have a variety of different things. Um, because if you've ever dealt with either anxiety or depression, you know, sometimes one thing that works one day may not work the same the next day. So I find it's handy to have a whole variety of tools in your toolbox. I actually started this the other day, and I was laughing as well when we were talking about these last week. It's funny, my journal books, even if I've had them for years and worked through them, typically have no writing in them, because I'll use a separate journal to do my recordings. So I keep my journal books usually empty, because then if I go back to redo the exercise, I'm not swayed by what I had thought before. But if you look in my other books, like the How to Hunt Ghosts, I have all kinds of notes, little arrows. They're dog-eared. I write all over the place in my books and make different comments in them. So it's kind of funny. My reading books covered highlight writing. My journal books, not so much. But I did enjoy starting this, and it's interesting. Oh, Mr. Gray, you know this book. Have you worked through it or seen it? I love that idea, JP, about donating to charities and the food and enjoyment, liquor, TV. I remember I was 16 when I went to England, and it was amazing. My stepmother was British, so we had gone and visiting with her family. And yeah, it was a wonderful time of just sitting and visiting. And to me, that's what that time of year should be about, is, you know, remembering the peace on earth and connecting with other people, and, you know, helping out our fellow humans. I mean, to me, that's what the season is supposed to be about. Not how many boxes are under a tree, or who can outdo someone else decorating, and how much debt can you get into. It's myself, I prefer homemade gifts, because you've taken the time, you've worked on it. You're right, JB. Do you know of the book? It's actually fascinating, Dan. And in the beginning, it starts with talking about manifesting. And I love that it points out that you have to actually do something. You come up with your goal, you think it through, but then you need to take some action to get things happening. You can't just sit in a chair, sit on a couch. Ooh, I wish my husband would win Lotto Max, and expect that's going to happen. Or, oh, I wish I had 1,000 subs on YouTube, and just keep wishing, wishing. You have to do the work. You have to reach out. You have to make connections. So there's an action part to manifesting as well. And I really appreciate that stressed in this book. Some of the other books don't say that as much. It talks about affirmations, and I'm a big believer in those. And I have what's called my Life is Great Because journal. And I've mentioned it, I think it was in one of my videos before. When I had my back injury over 10 years ago, things were very dark, very dismal, and I needed to find a way to start moving forward and back up again. So I had read a book called Steering by Starlight which is by Martha Beck, and it comes up with a lot of wonderful suggestions, ideas, learning about energy vampires and choosing who you're around, what your thoughts are. And that's also when I was reading Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, which is great because there are weekly activities for 12 weeks, and it really helps you get in touch with your creative side and all that busy brain stuff. So between those two, I came up with the idea of doing, like I say, my Life is Great Because journal. So focusing on what's going right, what am I doing in a day? When I started it, I only had 2 entries. I got out of bed, I got dressed, yay me. And for a few days, that's all it was. And then I started really thinking and looking around. And the important thing as well is they do definitely work. And it focuses you in the here and now. So I am, living the dream. I It's a beautiful sunny day. I love my life. I love where things are headed. You could say, I'm a source of light, which, gets you thinking about the direction you want to move. There's so many, and it's going to be different for everyone. And I think that's the crucial part as well, is focus on what are your priorities? What are important for you? What is going right for you? Where do you want to move in terms of the direction? Whether that's, I have friends who take the time and make the effort to keep in touch, or in my case, my studies are on track, meaning that, I'm reading the material I'm interested in, I'm putting information together. It can be any number of things. And so, although 10 years, well, maybe it's closer to 11 now, when I started doing that, it was only 2 things. Since then, and it's a journal about this size, and I fill up 2 pages of different things. And I always make sure I put it in the present tense. I know that they say be realistic, but still for a giggle, I put in there, my husband won Lotto Max, because, hey, somebody's got to win it. So why not us? And, there's plenty of people I would be happy to share that with. So I put it in there for a giggle because you know what? If it's like they say, if you don't buy a ticket, you can't win. Now, I personally buy scratch tickets because I don't have the patience to wait days to find out if I've won a ton of money. So I do scratch and win. My husband's been doing Lotto Max for probably 30 or so years. And I'm still waiting for him to win that sucker, but it could happen. So this book goes through in the beginning because you need to know who you are. So there's a page on affirming your self-worth, your health and your body image, and you write positive statements about yourself. What are your career goals? What are your personal goals? And then, and this is a wonderful quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. So once you get clear about where you want to go and head, then he talks about keeping a journal. And there are a number of other exercises, finding your helpers. And what you do once you've picked on what you really want to focus on and do, in the morning, you write your manifestation statement 3 times. So, and you just short and sweet. In the afternoon, you write 6 things that you're grateful to have in your life. So, focusing on what's going right. And then at bedtime, you write out your manifestation 9 times. So that's why it's called 369. You don't do that every day. As it says in the beginning of the book, try and do it 3 times. Here we go. 3 times a week. So it's something that you could keep by your bedside. It might be, something that you glance through on your coffee table. And again, it's that getting your thoughts in the direction that you want to head. The last book that we talked about last week was The Inner Me Journal. And I really enjoy this. And this is one that I definitely have a separate journal for, because sometimes instead of words, I like to draw or doodle, and I use a variety of different colored pens. Smelly pens are my favorite. So it's a journal to connect with yourself and discover what brings you true happiness. Because again, it's something different for all of us. So, just getting to recognize that. And there's different pages. So when are you ordinary? When are you spectacular? And they do give you a lot of space to do an answer. And then the pages also have quotes at the bottom. So there are 2 ways of spreading light: to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. That's by Edith Wharton. So again, it's if you're into journaling or just wanting to do some stuff, there's great questions. So what do you find boring? What culture would you like to learn more about? So there's a variety of different things to do there. So since I've been babbling for a bit, I want to catch up on less about the people, more about the presence. We'll find our way back. I hope so, Black Dragon. Said, haven't been a fan, long time. Yes, you're very lucky to still have family. BBC's Christmas Ghost. Yeah, Christmas Carol is one of my all-time favorites. Jack is definitely my go-to Halloween, and Ebenezer Scrooge is definitely my Christmas. The black and white, need to watch. The affirmations. Visualization is a great way. Yep. Mental walk along. So relaxation, exactly. I don't think you can ever do it too much. I think we know when we kind of need to chillax and just do a little side trip. And that's what gets our brain going, right? Is that having an imagination and just taking that bit of a break. We have a new first. Very often. Yeah, get out of bed and shower. Exactly. Baby steps. And when I was a case manager years ago, before I worked as an educational assistant, the important thing is you start where you're at. When I was a caseworker, you start where your client's at, regardless of whether they're in an institution. I worked in group homes with a variety of different groups. Some were dealing with substance abuse and issues from their childhood and various circumstances. So, and I've worked as a case manager with developmentally delayed adults. So you set up programs and that's it. You set up programs and strategies for clients, and we need to focus on ourselves and do that self-care. And that's okay. It's not selfish. If you're not taking care of yourself, how can you have the energy? And we enjoy the babbling. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I definitely babble. And it's funny because On the opposites, I love watching your live streams and just listening to you chat. So yeah, I'm a babbler. What can I say? Yes, Alistair Sim, exactly, JP. Yeah, I've packed a lot into my just shy of 60 years, Dan. Um, and actually, that reminds me of someone who's sadly no longer with us, but she was my role model growing up. I grew up on a farm, and so this woman named Mabel used to work for my father, and she was my hero. And she had done a number of different jobs. She was a speak your mind, no holes barred kind of person. You never had to guess where you stood with her. And yeah, like her, much to sometimes the annoyance of people, I'm WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I don't really mince words. As I used to say to my clients, if you have something to say to me, good, bad, whatever, just say it to my face, then we can talk about it. I have no use for people who do this talk behind people's back stuff. Almost let another word slip there. But I figure if people would just speak their mind, I mean, be respectful, listen to what other people have to say, but don't play stupid games and drama rama. I don't have the time for it. After I turned 50, I had less and less patience for it. It's like, you know what? Life is short. I've lost too many family members, too many friends, some who had no idea what was going to happen. So I'm not wasting my time on BS nonsense. I mean, this past summer, perfect example, one of our neighbors, 54 years old, which is young. I mean, when I was a kid, I would have thought it was old. Now I think it's young because, well, I'm past it. 54 years old, nice guy, all of that. Found out he had cancer. 2 weeks later, he was gone. It's like, WTF, you know, just boom. And when you've seen that happen more than once, you really start to lose patience for people who buy into the drama rama. And I've been looking into a few different things. It's been an interesting discovery week for sure. I had no idea there was something called troll farms. Seriously, that's how people choose to spend their life, trolling other people and getting hired to be a troll? I mean, I guess part of it is if you find something you're good at, stick with it. But for the love of Pete, could you not find something to help humanity rather than this other stuff? Yeah, that's great, JP, of the work that you do for sure. Nothing wrong with being upfront. Yeah, well, some of the people who know me would disagree with you there. Debunking, yeah, swamped in drama. And I will actually get to that in a little bit, and nothing specific. And actually, we did talk a bit about that last week. And John was right. JP was right. We totally respect you because you don't get into the drama rama, you don't put people down, you don't make it personal. And some of the stuff lately is just cringe. I'm sorry. There are some people, especially after I started going to some of these different channels' homepages, I've just lost respect for some individuals, and it really does make me sad. On the other hand, in terms of the actual community from both sides, I've met some wonderful people. Thank you for being here and, Some of you are here, some I see on other live streams and have chats with. So it's not all bad. And I think that comes up to that, focusing on what's going right. It is, yeah, I can see why it would put you off, Dan. And I mean, you get a whole different perspective from some of this than, say, me, who isn't in touch with a number of people like that, or, the same number of comments and things. And it has to be very frustrating because I love watching when you're doing debunking because, like I say, it's not personal. You keep it lighthearted, but you also show and focus on the video, right? This was a mask. That was a cut. This was a string. You're debunking the video. You're not targeting people or talking about their personalities. To me, that part isn't really, and I know there are people who would disagree. JP and I were just talking a bit about this in comments, is some of it's getting a little too personal, and it's crossing that line of, it isn't really debunking, it's clickbait, let's get the views. Or even show, even if I'm disagreeing, yeah. Treat others how you want to be treated. Exactly, Dan. And you've also made a good point, and I consider you a role model in terms of YouTube as well, because you're right. You're thinking of down the road and what you're saying in videos and how do you want to be seen by other viewers, and always keeping in mind, right, that, and yes, sometimes there's a rant or what have you, but it's never over the top disrespectful, right? So it comes to that, how do you want to be treated? What do you want other people to think about you? It's maintaining your credibility. And again, with some of the shenanigans going on, I've sadly lost that with some people, partly because of some of the comments that I've read, partly by some of the videos and the titles that I've seen. It's not what I'm interested in being a part of. So I'm highly selective about the channels that I'm going to watch. And again, it comes down to, right? And why I end my videos with, thank you for the gift of your time. Time is precious. And if people are going to share that with me, then I'm immensely appreciative of that, whether it's during a live stream or they're watching my videos that I've uploaded or they're taking time to comment. I mean, money in that comes and goes up and down, but time is something that for us just moves in one direction. So if someone's going to give you the gift of their time, then I think be respectful of that. It just, you absolutely do have fun. But the thing is, you have fun, but not at the expense of someone else. So again, it comes back to that you're being respectful and you're presenting in a way that's comfortable and right for you. You enjoy it, you have fun doing it, your viewers appreciate it. And I know many people look forward to the videos. The one with Vlad, right? The one that you just did with Vlad was hilarious. A number of people enjoyed it. I had a good laugh going through the comments. There are definitely some ladies who wanted to be in that video. So that was a good chuckle. And by the way, he's from Wallachia. And I know that because I actually, before I was going to do my video on Vlad Tepes, which I'll eventually get there. But I went through and checked out the different pronunciations because I know how to say Transylvania, no problem. But I did want to be sure that, I had said it right. So I looked that up to find out. Oh, okay. Well, you definitely had fun, and it was good for a chuckle for sure. And I'm glad Animal got to be a part of the show. I have all my different Oh, see, you can't see my latest gizmo, so I'm gonna have to grab them. Oh, there we go. I can show them this way. So I have my little Zen ornament, and I have his orbs on. He's actually a gnome for the outdoors, but I liked him and he reminds me to be calm. And we got the battery changed in him. So my little guy has his lights on again and sits here in my living room. But yeah, so there's a lot of, he's great. I was so sad. I had him outside. And unfortunately, because I don't have much left with solar things, so he was only lit up outside for a couple of days. And then I had my husband play with it the other day because he has a little button on his back. Well, oh, there he goes. And put a battery in him so he works again. So I'm like, that's it. He's staying inside and he's my little Zen guy, how to keep the peace. So yeah, that was pretty much yeah, well, Dan, I can totally relate. There's times where I think I've got it figured out, and then the camera starts going, and it's like, oh, crap. You're just never quite sure. But so that was our recap. Oh my goodness, it's 47 minutes, and that was the recap of last week. Well, we did get into some new stuff this week as well. So I kind of wanted to start on the 3 fiction novels I've just finished. And they come up with, and this will be a segue to some of our other things. So I've already talked about The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. And that one, it gave me the creeps when I read it in the 70s, and it was just as creepy now because of the animal research part of that. Yeah, it creeped me out. I mean, and I'm not going to give away the end. I always try to avoid spoilers, but I'm kind of glad one person got their comeuppance, shall we say. But it brings up the question, as did Frankenstein, which I just finished reading. Actually, it came up in our last chat, and I think you were there, Dan. I read Frankenstein. I've seen the movies, but I've never read Mary Shelley's book. And I have to say, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. It's close to some of the movies, and it was a great read. So I'm glad that I finally took the time to read it. But again, like Dr. Moreau, the question with Victor Frankenstein was when is science going too far? When is too much too much? And unfortunately for him, that came at a very steep price. I also, although I've heard about it for years, just read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is a collection of strange tales by Robert Louis Stevenson. So I tend to, well, as JP describes me, I'm eclectic and quirky. I mean, I'm all over the place. I read some old classics. I've read some newer books, as in just 2023, amazingly, and pretty much everything in between from different subjects. So again, with Jekyll and Hyde, he started out trying to figure out his shadow side, came up with an experiment, and again, things got out of control. So much happened. So when is too far with science? All of these individuals had started with trying to find answers and make the world a better place. But then things went wrong and the research didn't go exactly as they had planned. And I think it's important to understand and read things like this because, I mean, our scientists today, when is too far? And what are, what are they doing that maybe they shouldn't be? Another book, I haven't reread it lately, but I've also read Dean Koontz, and The Watcher is another perfect example of when is too far, and scientists. I'm just going to catch up on your, 1930. Wow, 1930s movie. Dean Koontz, yeah, I've read a few of his, eclectic and quirky. I'm still thinking I need to put that up on my channel page, JP. Classic. Yep, Jules Verne. I'm almost finished his box set. I bought last year. Indigo used to be chapters, had a box set. So I finally read 20,000 Leagues. And I'd read Journey to the Center of the Earth years ago and just reread it. That one's hard because I have claustrophobia. So I was like, oh, I could imagine them in these things. And I'm like, ah. Oh, I've read some. I've been up till 2, 3 in the morning to finish a book. And that's when I was working full time. It was like, okay, it's going to be a long day, but I had to know how the book ended. There was one, The Center of the Earth. Yeah. Yeah, no doubt the imagination. And I mean, again, they're still talking. I mean, the time machine, right? The Morlocks and is it Eloy? Might be pronounced Eloy, with the two different classes of humanity and, living underground and that. With the balloon, 80, oh, see, it's a little too far over there. 80 Days Around the World, I think, is the balloon one. Yep, you got it, Dan. Yeah. So that was an interesting read as well. And I wanted to see, I've got my little, see, Dan, I can't do it on the fly. I've got to have my cheat sheets or I never remember what I was doing. Sorry. The one point that I did want to make, this kind of, I'll segue away from this because I'm not going to spend a lot of drama talk. But the one thing I've also noticed, and I get everyone has their own take on things, but lately with a lot of the debunkers, everyone's doing the same subject, if not the same channel or video within 2 weeks' time. And I get that they all have their own subscribers and own way of doing it, but it's become like the top fives, unfortunately, that, if you've seen the subject once, for me, why do I want to watch that 4 or 5 times? I've heard why it didn't work. And that's the other thing that I do like about your channel, Dan, is it's kind of a one and done. I was mentioning to John Paul, oh yeah, here. So I mentioned about the troll farms. That still creeps me out. But when I did hashtag paranormal, there's 69,000 channels out there. So why is it that it's only maybe 10 that keep coming up being debunked? I mean, there's a ton of different channels there. It's wild. Oh, yep, cover them once or twice. Exactly. That's why I enjoy your channel, because it gives me exposure to a lot of different channels. And it's, well, I don't know if you saw the debunking video, Dan, but like I said, I think I covered it in the debunkers and debunker community. It's that double edge, right? Because every time you keep mentioning the same channels, you're giving them a shout out. Sorry, I got to get a drink. Too much talking. And it's grape juice, not wine, grape juice. Here we go. But every time a channel gets mentioned, okay, yes, it shines a light on what they're doing or what they're up to. But unfortunately, it also sends traffic their way, right? So it's, I mean, all you can do is what you do, right? And you do it with good intentions and respect. And yeah, that's, in my opinion, that's all you can do. I think I'll mention it here because I do want to, and this will tie in with the next thing that I was going to bring up. So I decided to take a look and take some of my own advice about reading an about page regarding a channel, because I was curious that, there's certain channels that get mentioned. So I looked up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I looked up 6 of the channels that keep coming up. And I wanted to know, how do they describe themselves? Because quite often we end up referring to them as clickbait or fake paranormal. And I keep seeing these names come up. So I thought, okay, how do they describe themselves? And here's what I found out, which was bizarre. And I haven't looked on their about pages in quite some time. So Twin Paranormal, who there's been a whole bugaboo and different things there. What I noticed is at the very top of their page, they're now classed science fiction / paranormal. So anyone who would go to their about page, and now you can just click on it at the thing, they're fiction. Excuse me. They're not claiming to be investigators. I mean, granted, their stuff is over the top, to me, silly. I can't watch it, but people should recognize, yeah, I didn't know that either. And I don't know when they changed it. I know at one point they used to have entertainment way, way back when I did watch them. And then I don't know if their friend Nick just got fed up with stuff and, went on his way. So now it's just been the 3 of them, the twins, and see, mind fart. I can see him. I can't think of the third guy's name. But it used to be 4 of them way back. But they now, right at the top of their channel, have science fiction paranormal. Now, it doesn't mean all their viewers recognize that they're fiction, but in terms of coming forward, they seem to have. Omar Gosh is another one. His about section, which is quite detailed, and I was surprised. He's got 4.37 million subs. Guy's popular. No wonder he could buy a ranch. On his about section, he states outright, not a paranormal investigator. He goes on to say that he makes entertainment, fun videos with scary reactions. Omar Gosh is something I heard, whether that's true or not. But yeah, he outright says, I'm not a paranormal investigator. So there's nothing to debunk. He's just making videos like Tim Morosoff and others. The really big bugaboo one that's going the circuit right now, Sam and Colby. I was curious. Who are these two guys? Because again, it's not content that I personally watch. They have 11 million subs on their About page, not paranormal investigators. They make scary content. So again, what's to debunk? They've said they're not doing investigations. They're just making basically horror videos, and they've said it right on their About page, which I found interesting. And what makes me sad about some of the things happening right now, I mean, I don't know Sam and Colby. I don't watch their content. The stuff that's, making the circuit and getting the clicks and views right now is a year old. Was the behavior inappropriate? Absolutely. But that was a year ago. Have we not all done something stupid that we regret at some point in our life? And the other factor is I don't know when they were at the Conjuring house for a week, but that series of videos have just started coming up. If they were always acting that douchey, and what I did notice from watching a podcast, Dead Cold knows who it was because I found it through him. The Paranormal Monkey, I think. And I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he was doing an interview with the previous owner, Cody, of the Conjuring house. And so they were talking about the house and different things. And according to that individual, there are 32 cameras set up around the Conjuring house. So if Sam and Colby were always acting like dingles, there would have been a lot caught on camera. So to bring up stuff from a year ago that's been addressed by them and the owner, supposedly, let it go, right? At this point, according to their About page, they're not saying that they're paranormal investigators. There's nothing to debunk. That's like pulling up a Endgame, which I'm sorry if either anyone watching enjoyed Endgame, drove me nuts. But that's like pulling up Endgame and pointing out what's fake in it. It's all fake. It's a movie. So, another one, and this one, well, the other surprised me, but so did this one. Yasko is another one that keeps coming up constantly. Fun fact, if you go to his homepage, I create videos based on all things spooky. That's exactly what he says, based on. So again, he's not claiming to be an investigator. Below that, it says horror and entertainment. So he's not claiming to be a paranormal investigator. He's just making fun movies like Omar Gosh, Sam and Colby. Before I get to the other two, and they're both dingleberries, believe me, because they're the only two that I read the About pages who claim to be real. I get why, understand. Yeah. More about the people, you're right. Exactly. And I mean, that's JP. I was just reading about the fake but entertainment. That's why I used to watch the top 5 channels. I didn't believe any of it. To me, they were just good for a giggle. and, something to chill out at the end of the day. But I never for a moment believed it. Now, sadly, there are tons of people who do. But again, if you read their about pages, they don't claim to be showing real paranormal. They're storytellers just trying to entertain people and give people a break from, all the nonsense that whatever this world is. Dan, I can't imagine you've done things that you might have regretted. Iron Man! No, not Iron Man. Winter Soldier. A Winter Soldier fan, not too sure about Captain America. I think Winter Soldier because that was circumstances he never wanted and others took advantage. I'm always going to go for the underdog, I guess. Exactly, JP. Exactly. That stuff with Yasko and Beardo. And I was thinking about that when I was doing my notes for what I want to cover. I agree, Dan, and especially after because on your home pages, and it's right. Like you don't even have to click on Yasko's to see that it says based on all things spooky. So, I mean, again, if a viewer goes, and I get not everybody goes there, but Yasko isn't pretending to be real paranormal. Now, the sad thing is, well, I guess it depends on your opinion, but these people, sorry, 754,000 subs, Omar over 4 million, SNC over 11 million. So, Yasko, 473 million. I guess if you want to get noticed, you start poking the folks with tons of subs because that in turn, okay, glad you enjoy your dinner, and I'm so glad you were able to pop by. Take care, and I hope your move goes super well, and here's to hoping your Wi-Fi gets connected early on. Thanks so much for popping in and for your comments. Much appreciated. The last two that I checked, and these are the two who claim to be really haunted, is, of course, Lee. And he claims that he has a poltergeist. Take care, Dan. Lee claims to have a poltergeist, and what I noticed on his about page is that he's now taking his poltergeist on the road. I guess people have had enough of seeing him in his bedroom, which was just cringe. But apparently now he's going around the UK with his little buddy. And of course, Lainey and Ben with their friendly poltergeist. Did I say polterghost? Oh my gosh, I meant poltergeist. Anyhow, those, out of all the channels, those are the only two that claim to be real. Now, here's the funny thing about poltergeist, and this is going to tie into the world's scariest hauntings, a series I'm going to talk about in just a minute, and I hope I can. Yep, here we go. So the definition as of 1993, and this book, Poltergeist and the Paranormal. It's actually an excerpt from, as my books all go falling, The Encyclopedia of the Unexplained and Mysteries of the Mind, which was published by Bookmart Limited. And that was in 1993. Now, according to them, The definition by researchers is now repetitive, spontaneous psychokinesis, RSPK, to describe poltergeist cases. Essentially, physical effects occur with a psychic cause more than once and without deliberate intention on anyone's part. So, as quite often is discussed, you have often a youth, teenager, male or female, can quite often be female. It can also occur with adults. There's, intense emotions. There may have been trauma. It can typically last for a few weeks or a few months, and in rare cases go on for years. The thing with the poltergeist is it also isn't just going to stay in your home. I mean, if the individual is going through a lot of intense emotional stuff, there are going to be things happening no matter where they go, whether it's home, school, shopping, what have you. So for these people who keep saying they have a poltergeist in their home, what they're ignoring is the fact that one of them must be generating that poltergeist, because it doesn't just happen. And the majority of people, and this is what I found funny, last week I called it World's Most Hauntings. It's actually World's Scariest Hauntings. There's 10 episodes and it's available on Prime. And it was fascinating because they go to 10 different locations. Thank you, JP. It's attached to the person. So throughout the episodes, they go through to different locations. Now they have 3 paranormal experts. I don't know how you become one, but anyhow. And then there's one person who does a paranormal podcast. What I found interesting is that one of these experts described a poltergeist as a noisy spirit. I'm thinking, seriously, you're supposed to be an expert. Look beyond the Google definition of noisy spirit. This information is available. Do some research. It's not just a noisy spirit. There's more to it than that. The other thing, and this series, by the way, is from 2018. So, that definition has been around since 1993. I'm pretty sure they could have come across it had they done a bit of research. If you're interested in this series, I would say go to Amazon.com. It gives a description of each of the episodes. I tried IMDb, which is supposed to be the movie database, and sadly, they didn't have information about the episodes. So if you want a description of each of them, Amazon.com is the place to go. The other interesting thing about this series, each of these locations had a paranormal investigator who has been attached to it for 5 to 10 years. In other words, this hopping around to different locations all the time is, yes, a great way to see different locations and check out, different places and delve into the history and the stories. But the individuals at these locations, you're welcome, JP, that do these focus on these locations. They've been at it for 5 to 10 years. So seriously, if they haven't caught the Holy Grail on video or an EVP by now, it should be a good clue that, and again, go to the About pages. But if you're watching a channel claiming to be real paranormal and they're catching something every week, it's pretty easy to tell it's nonsense. You just have to look into things and do a little bit of research. So it was fascinating to listen to these individuals and what they've come across over time. Um, so JP, I'll let you know the different locations. And I loved it because some of these we would have seen on the different channels that you and I both follow as well. Their first episode was at the Ancient Ram Inn. So it was fascinating to see it from this perspective on Prime. And like I say, they've got people who have been there, and they also talk to the owners of these locations. So it was a very different take than the way some of the people who have done the investigations have presented it. So with the Ram Inn, I'm thinking Ouija Brothers, and I'm pretty sure Amy's Crypt has been there as well. So it's amazing to get those little bits of information. The second episode is about Leap Castle. I think Amy may have been there, but I can't think of another channel that I've seen do that location. Episode 3 was Kelvedon Hatch, which I'm not quite familiar with, so that would be a check on the Amazon description. It was an interesting episode. A location I had no idea about is Griffintown in Montreal, the province right next door to me. That was a sad and interesting story. Episode 5 was the Edinburgh Vaults, and I've seen a few people go down there, and again, a lot of different stories and history with that location. Episode 6 is The Mermaid Inn, which I've never heard of. So it was interesting to find a new location. Now, number 7, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Plas Teg. It's in North Wales. So that was fascinating to, oh, cool. Dead Cold's going to be doing the hatch soon. Neat. I'll have to check into that. So, JP, did I say that right? It's Plas Teg, Plasteg. It was a very interesting building in the history. Episode 8, and you'll know of this one, is Bodmin Jail, and I've seen a couple of different investigations there. 9 is the Merchant's Mansion. That one is in New York, actually. And I'm not sure if that's... Oh, cool. Yeah, that was a fascinating episode to watch. The Merchant's Mansion is in New York. I'm not sure if it's still standing or not, because this was 2018. And unlike the majority of other locations, what have you, this still has the furniture, clothing, all the stuff from the family that originally lived there. So it's quite fascinating. And, it didn't have to be recreated to look like the time period. It's literally still from that time period. So I do hope they were able to come up with some funds and keep that. And the last episode was Huska, which was interesting. And I know I've seen Amy go there. It was a very interesting take from this series, the way they described it and different things. Okay. Yeah, like I say, I could have had it wrong. I've got a book to learn Gaelic. I'm not sure if that will help me or not, but it'll be a while before I'm anywhere close to figuring that out. But yeah, Huska was fascinating. And with Huska, there's something they could easily figure out there because, and see, again, this goes to all the different subjects, right? I'm thinking back to the pyramids years ago. I can't think of his first name. The last name was, I think, Gattenbrink. He is a German developer or inventor. He's got a little robot that went through the shafts in the pyramid. I'm thinking, why couldn't they get him to build a little machine and lower it into the pit and find out what's actually going on there? I mean, there's all kinds of stories and odd things about Huska. And I mean, it's in excellent shape. I can't imagine owning it, or some of these other locations for that matter. But, there are ways now with technology, in this case, a little robot, that they could easily find out what's down in the pit and going on. And, wouldn't it be better to have answers than to just keep speculating? Another thing that they had talked about was the stone tape theory. That came up in a number of the different investigations because, of course, all the stone, the castles, the vaults, they're all impacted by stone. And I kept hearing about this, but I really didn't know what stone tape theory was. And basically, the idea is it's become a recorder. So the events and things happening are somehow recorded onto the stone. So what some people are watching is a playback, which is why these spirits, what have you, don't interact. It's because they're not really there. It's like watching a film, right? You can see the actors, but the actors can't see you and interact with you. The thing that I have with that is that a stone is very different than a crystal. A crystal has a certain structure, and of course, different crystals have different set structures, but they're repeated. A quartz crystal, all the quartz crystals have that same structures. A stone, I mean, if stones could record and keep some type of information, whether that's because of electromagnetic stuff or other reasons, then I would think stones would be as prominent in all this technology as crystals are, right? I mean, crystals are in so many different things. They're known to be able to store different things. So I would think energy imprint, maybe, but again, how would it stay on the stone? Like, does it have to have a certain amount of crystal in the stone for it to be able to take the imprint? And then the other part is, why are only some things imprinted in the stone? For example, if you think of some of these castles, they had been inhabited for centuries. There were great things that happened in them, weddings, festivals, feasts, and there were some pretty horrific things that happened in them, battles and any number of things. So why aren't some of those weddings playing back? Or why aren't some of the festivals and feasts playing back? And, I would think if the intensity of traumatic things happening could get imprinted, why couldn't the intensity of good things happening get imprinted? Right? It should have the same type of impact, right? When you're happy, there's a lot of energy. If you have a whole number of people, it should create that same type of intensity and imprint or stay on the item, right? So that was kind of pretty much, yeah, took me less time to cover what I wanted to cover than it did the recap, which is hilarious. Excuse me, dry throat again. But Yeah, so there's a lot of different things to consider. There was one more thing I was going to cover, but I might actually leave that for a video down the road, because then that gives me something to say in the video. But there's a lot of things to contemplate. And I know definitely myself in the next little while what I'm going to be. Sorry, I just got to move my legs around a bit. So that means I'm wobbling a bit. But I'm definitely going to be focusing on, you know, positive channels, trying to find answers, and who's actually doing some research and looking into things like radiation, atmospheric conditions, and see that keeps coming up. The intensity of the violence as well. So, yeah, I agree. Those could certainly be factors for sure. And I mean, atmospheric conditions, when I was doing ghost stories, I mean, a lot of the things that people saw or experienced were on stormy nights, whether it was a thunderstorm or strong winds. That certainly seems to have something to do with it. And I mean, I don't understand such things. So, how that all impacts the electromagnetic field or the intensity or the strength, it could all be related to that. There are ghosts that appear without water or, other things. So I guess with that, the question could also be, do some of those appearances have to do with a connection to the individual? As in, if it's a loved one or a friend, are they able to somehow manifest or appear or do something to get our attention because they're trying to get through to us? Are some people just more open and sensitive to being able to recognize and see that type of thing? I mean, there's so many questions. And this morning I did a video on my project, The Occult, I mentioned in one of my videos a little while ago. And I did that in the late 1970s. And I read it yesterday and went through, made my notes, and it was good for a laugh. Some of the things that I said were just hilarious, and some things I've immensely changed my viewpoint on. But what I found almost sad is the fact that all the questions I asked in that essay still haven't been answered now in 2023. And there's so much more in terms of technology and so many more people out there looking for the answers. It's a shame we're no closer. Really? Yeah, I have to watch, and I will watch those episodes again because it was fascinating the things that people shared, and some of it is sometimes just a feeling, and either a sense that something's there, or it doesn't even necessarily get hot or cold. It's like when someone walks into a room and you can feel the change, right? There's a difference. But in this case, you can't actually see who's walked into the room. It's interesting how that type of thing happens for sure. But I mean, it's an ongoing mystery. The one thing that I did really have a laugh about, and it was in one of the sections that I covered in my essay, and I had said, maybe we'll have answers by 2000. And it's like, well, I guess, I'm not psychic because it's 2023 and we still don't have the answers. So, it's I guess that's the other thing that gets me with some of the stuff going on is how are we going to find answers if people aren't seriously looking. They're not keeping accurate records. So, how do you make correlations between the various investigations? What was the weather like? What else was going on? Um, how close are the different towns? And if you go back numerous times, at least you get to start knowing and recognizing the building. So you get to know the different creaks and cracks and immediately recognize it's the building, not, the paranormal. Kids are definitely fearless. Um, and that's it. And I mean, again, even with that, right? Is it a matter of kids are able to see and feel or hear more? Is it because they're open and haven't become as skeptical or jaded as adults? Is it easier for some reason for whether you call them spirits or ghosts, maybe they're dimensional beings? Is there something that attracts them to children because they're open and willing to communicate and, they don't have ulterior motives?